A More Beautiful Life is a listener-supported show. You can learn more about the benefits you receive from your support, such as access to other courses, special access to tools, blogs, and skills through our Patreon channel, patreon.com/A More Beautiful Life. Hello, you are listening to A More Beautiful Life podcast, recognizing, appreciating, and integrating earliest life experiences. My name is Kate White, and I created this podcast because of my passion for my work as a therapist and an educator in preventing and resolving earliest trauma. I believe that integrating our earliest experiences brings us closer to who we really are. On the show, I will be having discussions with others on the path who have explored healing our earliest experiences in life, or who, in my opinion, have found ways to live a more beautiful life. Today on the show we have Mary McGowan. Mary is the Executive Director of the Association for Training on Trauma and Attachment in Children, ATTACH. She has years of personal and professional experience. She has worked with the North American Council on Adoptable Children, NACAC, doing successful grassroots recruitment for foster and adoptive families, and as a post-adoption specialist. She has earned accolades as the National Education Manager for the Professional Association of Treatment Homes, PATH, and is an experienced trainer who teaches and consults locally and nationally. Educationally, Mary's undergraduate degree is in psychology with minors in community violence prevention and child development, and her graduate work is in counseling and psychological services. Mary holds several national certificates, including Therapeutic Crisis Intervention for Family-Based Placements from Cornell University, and is nationally certified Family Decision-Making Facilitator. Mary has fostered many children over 26 years and is a single adoptive parent of 5 youth ranging from 13 to 22 years old. She was a guardian of ad litem casa for 5 years and has experience with advocacy and success in obtaining services necessary for children. Mary shares her vast experience in an engaging and practical manner. As part of ATTACH, she has been very helpful in helping us orient towards helping children heal early attachment wounds. And today we are so lucky to have Mary McGowan, who's from ATTACH, here on the show. And I just am so excited to hear more about what your organization is and what you have to offer. So please, I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, thank you, Kate. I'm very excited to be here and share a little bit about our organization and just make a connection with someone in the field that really understands trauma and attachment.
Yes, I do. I mean, that's what I do for a living. I've really helped a lot of mothers and their babies and parents and professionals who are interested in learning a whole lot more about the baby's experience. But you tell us more about ATTACH, because I know a little bit. I know you guys have conferences and on trauma and attachment. So tell people what you want people to know.
Well, sure. So ATTACH stands for the Association for Training on Trauma and Attachment in Children. And our mission is to equip all communities to create healthy attachment and support healing trauma. And what that means in a simpler form is we want to help give the tools, the psychoeducation, the support, and the understanding for them to really learn how to create secure human connections with other human beings. Because as you know, if you don't get that in utero and the first year or so of life, it dramatically changes everything about your life from that point forward if there isn't intervention.
Yeah, so say a little bit more about that. You connect, you help professionals and parents, right?
That's correct. Our primary service audience is we work with therapists, mental health and behavioral health clinicians, also professionals like social workers, teachers, and we also look at judicial system, guardians ad litem, attorneys, and a variety of people, pretty much anyone working with children and families. And then of course, parents We work with our families. I would say 95% of the parents that come to our organization are foster and or adoptive parents. However, we don't exclusively serve that community. We serve anyone who's been um, impacted by early developmental trauma and hasn't had the opportunity to build an attachment. And so sometimes that could be divorce or military deployment. It could be hospitalization or separation from the primary caregiver. Besides the neglect and abuse, all those things can impact and interfere with creating that secure attachment.
Right. Well, you must be very fluent in the adverse childhood experiences then, and really knowing how adversity in this at that very tender time, especially the first 2 years of life, how that can impact the neurodevelopment of someone lifelong.
Well, it really does. And I think about, oh, like the study that was done in, I want to say 2011 in Romania, where they took PET scans and looked at, put dye into the brains and did a PET scan, which by the way is not harmful. And they were able to look at a healthy brain and the frontal lobes or the precortical region of the brain. And then they looked at a child who was in an orphanage for most of their life. And it was just profound to see the actual pictures in color and the huge gaping areas in that prefrontal cortex, of course, which is where we develop emotion and behavioral regulation, language, executive functioning, all sorts of things happen in that part of the brain. And when our children don't get that early on connection and feeling that when they have an issue, when they cry, their needs are going to be responded to, then it literally changes the structure of their brain. So then as we go through a process and we're trying to parent or teach children who have those missing areas in their brain and their prefrontal cortex region isn't stimulated, hasn't even grown like it needs to, we expect them to do things that they physiologically are not capable of doing. And thus starts the frustration and treating it, with punitive measures and things like that, instead of really understanding they don't have the capacity to do what we're asking them to many times. And so we need to step back and figure out, what are they saying with their behaviors? What are they telling us? And how can we repair that part of the brain, which is the wonderful thing, as you know, Kate, that neuroplasticity, right? The brain is plastic. And so fortunately it can change. And, to just continue with that study, after that child was placed for several years in a consistent, nurturing, loving home, those areas in the frontal lobe started developing significantly. And then, of course, we know that that means that child has the capabilities of doing some of that higher level thinking. So it's very exciting.
Right. Well, it goes to show you how vital it is to support the sort of attachment or the relation. What did you call it? The connectivity, the connections.
Right. We call it secure connectedness. Yeah, right.
And that's that's the mandate of your organization, is to support that on all these levels, right?
It really is, to really understand developmental trauma as opposed to environmental traumas such as tsunamis and rioting and things like that, and pandemics, which are all current right now in our society. Those things have an impact. They have a big impact, but they're different than that early on developmental trauma and attachment issues, which is a reciprocal interpersonal relationship, whereas other traumas don't necessarily have to include a reciprocal relationship. It can just be an environmental happening that impacts them.
Yeah, that comes in from the outside and it's kind of shocking or sudden. Yes. Whereas I know developmental trauma has sort of a long-term sort of toxic sort of impact. It's chronic. Yes. Right? What are the other things? What other ways can you describe developmental trauma so that our listeners can really understand?
So developmental trauma is something that we find a good term, if you will, to describe that early interpersonal reciprocal relationship, the lack of being able to connect with a parent. So maybe a baby who cries a lot, an infant, and the myth is, oh, let them cry, it builds their lungs or it makes them healthy. It does just the opposite. We're actually creating trauma by allowing them to just cry and have that learned helplessness where they feel that their way of reaching out to get what they need isn't being taken care of. And so when that builds over time, they begin to see humans, other people, caregivers as not reliable. They don't have a strong self-worth because their needs haven't been met, and they don't view the world as a safe place to explore and become autonomous. And so it really lays a foundation, either good or bad, depending on the attachment, whether they have developmental trauma or whether they're able to move forward in a healthy situation and understand how trauma has impacted them.
Mm-hmm. So you can repair this when you say, for example, you told me a big part of your parent group are foster parents. So tell us about working with that group and what their specific needs are like.
Well, sure. So again, while we work with any parent that's impacted and have children that have trauma issues or developmental trauma issues and attachment issues, I would say probably 95% of our parents that come to us and that we work with and train and support are foster and adoptive parents. And that, of course, is because the children who get placed in out-of-home placements come from the very background that we're discussing, where there's instability, inconsistency, possible mental health issues, drug issues, poverty, a lot of social economic factors, lack of support system, and they simply are intergenerational trauma victims, if you will, carrying the intergenerational trauma. Maybe they were not parented correctly, and so they parent like they were parented, which is our parenting roadmap, and it's not so good. And so in order for us to really help, we reach out to our parents and we teach them what it is. We teach them their own attachment style. What is their roadmap? What is their attachment style and their blueprint? And how does that impact how they parent, how they caregive, how they view things? We teach them about what's underneath the behavior. My favorite slide that we have is an iceberg, if you will, because parents call us when that iceberg, the tip of the iceberg is exploding, the behavioral and emotional and screw you, and I'm arguing and I'm lying and I'm throwing a desk over because I don't understand my homework, all those pieces. And what we teach parents is to look underneath at the massive part. What is that emotion and that behavior trying to say? Because they simply don't have the cognitive ability to even understand what's going on inside of their body when they get triggered by something. So they just emotionally or physically explode because, again, they don't have their higher cortical region built strongly. And so they don't have the impulse and the behavioral control which they need in order to calm themselves.
So you teach skill building to parents and what different behaviors mean, and in terms of the neurodevelopment or lack thereof, and what they can do to really start to fill in the gaps in these children, and also create sort of parenting behaviors that will reinforce the healthy growth and development in the brain and the body.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do. And we also provide support groups. We have support groups every week online, so parents can just come on and just go, oh, I'm so frustrated. What do I do about this? This has been happening. And it's meant to be a peer-to-peer support group with our parent-child advocate who works with the parents to just say, let's talk about it. She does many trainings and really helps to ground them, helps connect them to other parents and caregivers who are going through very similar things. Because believe it or not, as you know, but so many people think they're an island and they're going through this all alone, and they're really not. There's so many of us out there struggling with this. I know for me personally, I did foster care for 26 years and I adopted 5 children from foster care. And so I kind of live, eat, and breathe this every day. And it was such an awakening to go from traditional parenting, which I thought was good enough, the term that the counties use so often, into therapeutic parenting, where I was more tuned. where I listen more, where I stop myself, and it's just like, what's behind the behavior? What message are they trying to tell? What pain are they trying to reveal? And also understanding punishment doesn't work. It does not work. We need to discipline. Discipline means to teach. So we wait. We know that when they explode, they're in that midbrain, reptile brain. I like to call it a caveman brain.
Caveman.
I can relate to that.
Mhm.
And so they're in that fight, flight, or freeze, shutdown mode where they're unable to really relate to or hear or control what's going on in their body. That's not the time to talk to them. That's not the time to divvy out a consequence because they can't hear you. They're not calm. That's like telling you when you get, if we were to get, God forbid, hit by a car severely, and right then somebody starts telling you, well, if you would have put on your turn signal, and if you would, you are out of your mind, literally. You are, all your blood is pumping to your organs to keep you alive, and there's not a whole lot going on in that upper cortex, even for those that have a developed cortex. And so we have, by understanding these things, it changes how we parent. It's not going to the child and saying, stop doing this and stop doing that, but it's our perspective and how we approach our children and youth that really makes a difference in their response, in being able to calm them and soothe them sooner, and then talk about it later, if it's appropriate, and say, hey, you were frustrated, you kicked the dog food down the stairs and there's a million little pieces, let's go pick it up now, and not like, now go get and pick it up. But it's just because the idea isn't to punish. The idea is to understand them, let them learn from their behaviors, and create a new way. Well, you can tell I'm passionate about this.
Yes, no, you're very fluent in obviously if you're doing it for almost 3 decades, how to then parent, and the parenting is a healing journey. It's a hero's journey. You can, once you become a reflective parent, a parent that really can look at your own history and your own programming, so to speak, you can just stop and make some changes, especially if you get support, because you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't know, then once you begin to see what's possible, because there are other people out there that can give you that, what you call it, a roadmap. Do you have like maps available at your organization?
Well, we certainly use it in our training as far as just understanding what a roadmap is, which is basically we parent as we were parented, unless we make, as you said, that conscious awareness of making a change. And it's so a part of us that even when we make changes and shift how we parent, take some of those things that were good perhaps, and then the things not so good in our childhood, we depart from them and build healthier ways with the knowledge and understanding that we gain. But like children and everybody else does, when we are traumatized or tired or triggered ourselves, we default to that old roadmap.
Right. Yeah, that's the toughest thing. Parenting is one of the hardest things I've ever done, honestly, but it's also been one of the best thing, really, in my opinion, that ever happened to me. So you have programs for parents and you have programs for professionals. So why don't you tell people about your professional trainings?
Well, sure. I'd be happy to. So Attach has been around for 32 years.
Wow. Hey, that's a long time.
Yeah, they started the work with attachment before it was even recognized as a legitimate therapeutic service, and received a lot of pushback,
I remember those days. No, I remember those days.
Yeah. So, yeah. Right. So it's almost like an anomaly. And we, the group started having a annual conference. It started small, word of mouth. Of course, this is back before emails and cell phones. And so it was snail mail, telephone calls. Hey, if you know some people, invite them to Denver, we're going to have this conference, and it's been going ever since. So we have an annual fall conference. This year, we're going to do it very differently because obviously we can't meet in person for safety reasons. And so we have decided to start our event on the date that we are going to start our conference, but we are going to continue it throughout the entire month of October. So you really get a lot more. So instead of attending a 2 or 3 day conference, we are doing a one fee, and then you can listen to any and all. Some are pre-recorded, some are live. We're going to have Dr. Janina Fisher and some other big names come in and share their experiences and research-based understanding of this. We have a whole lot of workshops for everything from advanced clinical to parent to social worker, even miscellaneous important things like canine therapy, equine therapy. That holistic approach is vital. We do yoga in the morning, those kind of things. So we really try to take in the whole being, because we firmly believe that that is where the healing lies, within treating our whole being. One of the things unique to our organization is that we understand the connection between occupational therapy and trauma. And so there's been great research on sensory integration with like Pat Ogden and others that are leading the way. And she has presented at our conference a couple of times. But we have Maud LaRue from South Africa is on our board, and she has brought together world-renowned OTs literally across the world that are sharing an entire OT track with sensory input that's related to trauma. And we're just releasing a 2-day training on trauma and OT that will be a national certification for OTs that really want to get those tools so that they're able to put this into practice. And so we have our conference. We have beginning, intermediate, and advanced training. We have a postgraduate 80-hour training that Deborah Gray, who is kind of the queen of attachment issues, Deborah Gray created the training at Portland University, and she has gifted us with the ability to share this. And we did a train the trainer with her 2 years ago. And now we are doing this ATFT, attachment and trauma focused therapy, with actual hands-on clinical scenarios and work that is really taking off and allowing clinicians to be able to become certified in this.
Oh, it's so rich. You offer so much.
Well, thanks. We just keep trying to move along as we see a need. We try to connect and meet that need, or direct people to someone who can meet that need. A lot of folks see themselves as trauma informed or trauma practicing, and a lot of times they're trauma aware, which is a good start. But to really get the clinical skills that you need to sit down with children and families and integrate the same thing that we teach for parents, the therapeutic model that takes into account the brain and what's happening, developmentally, you have to learn that. It's not taught, unfortunately, still in communities and colleges and higher education. We're starting to see a few courses pop up here and there, but overall, that you might be able to catch a course on attachment, but there really isn't a minor or a certification in it, which of course we feel there needs to be. And that's why we created this training.
Oh yeah, I want to have a look at that. I'll put it in the show notes so people can find. I'll go through and make sure all the links that people can click and become a member. Yeah, because you said membership for parents is only $60. Is that correct?
It is only $60 a year, and the membership gives them the 4 support calls, direct contact with our parent support advocate. It gets them private Facebook, so you can talk with other parent members. Also, all of our workshops that we do online, that Attach puts online, again, not the conference, but our webinars monthly, are free to parent members, to all members. So if you're an organization, we have organizational memberships, and then that allows your staff to attend any and all of our monthly presentations for free. And we had a lot of people just sign up for those because we're doing our Hope for Healing training right now in a 3-part series. And so we had folks sign up for those because it was cheaper for them to sign up their organization as a member and then turn around and be able to have all their parents come or their staff.
Well, yeah, I know that healthy attachment really does create the foundation for, good behavioral learning, cognition, emotions, even, gross motor movement. So, I mean, on every level, this reciprocal parent-child relationship and is the basis for health lifelong, and it can start in utero. Do you have those programs for parents who are pregnant and And do you have the babies aspect also in your trainings?
So we do discuss what happens in utero in our training with the baby. We don't have specific programs, which I would love to team with you actually and do that, because uh, it, my heart too is in prevention. And
Yes.
we're not going to get to prevention. I mean, we need to continue to help all those that have been traumatized and have issues with connectedness with other human beings. Yet we also need to get up the river, if you will, and keep people from falling in the first place, and to help them, like you said, and like you do, looking at your great work that you do at the prenatal and perinatal center, and just be able to talk to them before they're pregnant, while they're pregnant, for them to have that understanding of what's happening. I think of Michael Trout's video on domestic violence.
Yes.
And the mom saying, when you're knocking me from wall to wall and hitting me, don't you realize that you're doing the same thing to the baby,
Yeah.
in utero? And I think that a lot of that, again, has to be taught early on. It should be mandated, in my opinion, part of prenatal care, so that they're able to make positive changes from the get-go in order to best try and make that connection and attachment with the caregiver and the parent.
And I remember your conferences from early on. I mean, I started teaching in 2003, and even then attachment wasn't widely taught or widely recognized on the professional level. And now it's everywhere, of course, which is good. And even in attachment for adults, into the way couples can communicate. But the neurodevelopment, I think, has not found its way exactly into medical school or higher education. All that we know about the autonomic nervous system, for example, and how things kind of get programmed in. But those of us in the field, like you, like me, and probably a lot of people that come to attach, are getting much more fluent in trauma-informed care and how the nervous system can adapt, and then it can heal.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that you would like people to know about healing these early attachment wounds? Just if you could say a few words, and then we'll start to complete our interview.
Sure. I think we need to take it step by step and not be overwhelmed with a bigger picture. Take a child and compare them to themselves, and look for small steps of growth and connectedness that they can have. It's by starting with education and understanding and retraining ourselves to think other than I'm doing this, and they're hurting me and they're breaking my house rules. But it's retraining ourselves to really say, what are they trying to tell me? What is that behavior showing me? It's having a deeper understanding of mindfulness and being able to bring that understanding into action, whether you're a parent, a professional, a therapist, a judge, to understand these basic pieces will make a world of difference. It takes a long time. As we know, our roadmaps are rigid and consistent and hard to change, but they can change, and we have seen that. That's why we call one of our books Hope for Healing, because we know that healing does happen.
Yes.
These things can make and do make a difference. And that's the exciting thing about the work that we do. We finally found the brain, the issues and what's happening. So when I started foster care many years ago, and they said, just tell them, that they're safe here and it's a loving family and you don't hit here and everything will be fine. Well, we know now that that doesn't work because you're not working with the brain and redeveloping and building a relationship. We need to make the shift from correction to connection.
That sounds good. The shift from correction to connection. Well, I will definitely direct people to your website. It's attach.org, right, Mary?
That's correct. That is correct. And they can email us at info@attach.org, and we'll be posting information about the conference soon. And we're happy to be there and help out any way we can. And I'm hoping, Kate, that this is just the beginning of some work that we might do together. And so glad to get to know you and your organization as well.
Right, well, I have a big focus on prevention and also working with pregnancy. So it's a time of great change and commitment on couples who come seeking. So it can be a time of great change, especially if you support them at this time. So I'm happy to partner with you in any way. And let's just see. I always end our talks by talking about a more beautiful life, and I just want to name that the secure attachment does make my life more beautiful. I know for myself, I had quite a difficult childhood, and then when you become in connection with people who are connected to you, like I've been married 30 years and know what earned secure feels like. I know that healing is possible. I know I can feel it in my own nervous system. So what you do does does make life more beautiful. And for you, Mary, what makes life more beautiful for you?
Well, the fulfillment of the work that I do in making a difference in people's lives,
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to have the honor and privilege to raise children that have developmental trauma and attachment, and feel and see their growth, whether it's a tiny step or a bigger step. It's so fulfilling and makes such a difference in my life, and hopefully in theirs as well.
Well, thank you for coming on our show today, Mary, and to be continued. We're going to do some things together, hopefully.
I hope so too. Thank you for your time and for this opportunity.
You've been listening to A More Beautiful Life podcast. To support our show, please go to Patreon /A More Beautiful Life.